So I have two interesting stories for you today. And after I tell you the stories, I want you to tell me what is the moral of the story that you think, could be ideal in those situations. And what morals have you picked up from these stories? Okay. So let's go to our first story here. The name of the story is The Little Old Woman Who Lived in a Shoe. So, once upon a time, there was a little old woman who lived in a shoe. The shoe stood near a great forest and was so large that it served as a house for the old lady and all her children, of which she had so many that she did not know what to do with them. But the little old woman was very fond of her children, and they only thought of the best way to please her. Strong Arm, the eldest, cut down the trees for firewood. Peter made baskets of wickerwork. Mark was chief gardener. Lizzie milked the cow, and Jenny taught the younger children to read. Now, this little old woman had not always lived in the shoe. She and her family had once dwelt in a nice house covered with ivy, and her husband was a woodcutter, like Strong Arm, her first son. But there lived in a huge castle beyond the forest a fierce giant who one day came and laid their house in ruins with his club, after which he carried off the poor woodcutter to his castle beyond the forest. When the little old woman came home, her house was in ruins, and her husband was nowhere to be seen. So this was the giant. This giant took the old woman's husband and he killed him. Night came on, and as the father did not return, the old lady and her family went to search for him. When they came to the part of the wood where the giant had met their father, they saw an immense shoe. They spent a long time weeping and calling out for their father, but met with no reply. Then the old lady thought that they had better take shelter in the shoe until they could build a new house. So Peter and Strong Arm put a roof to it and cut a door and turned it into a dwelling. Here they all lived happily for many years, but the old lady never forgot her husband and his sad fate. Strong Arm, who saw how wretched his mother often was, proposed to the next 11 brothers that they should go with him and set their father free from the giant. Their mother knew the giant's strength and would not hear of the attempt, as she feared they would be killed. But Strong Arm was not afraid. He bought a dozen of sharp swords, and Peter made as many strong shields and helmets, as well as crossbows and iron-headed arrows. They were now quite ready. Strong Arm gave the order to march, and they started for the forest. And the next day they came in sight of the giant's castle. Strong Arm, leaving his brothers in the wood close by, strode boldly up to the entrance and seized the knocker. The door was opened by a funny little boy with a large head who kept grinning and laughing. Strong Arm then walked boldly across the courtyard and presently met a page who took off his hat and asked him what he wanted. Strong Arm said he had come to liberate his father, who was kept as a prisoner by the giant. On this, the little man said he was sorry for him, because the part of the castle in which his father was kept was guarded by a large dragon. Strong Arm, nothing daunted, soon found the monster, who was fast asleep. So he made short work of him by sending his sword right through his heart, at which he jumped up, uttering a loud scream, and made as if he would spring forward and seize Strong Arm. But the good sword had done its work, and the monster fell heavily on the ground, dead. Now the giant, who had been drinking much wine and fast asleep in a remote part of the castle, Strong Arm had no sooner finished the dragon than up started the funny little boy who had opened the door. He led Strong Arm around the part of the courtyard where he saw his poor father, who at once sprung to his feet and embraced him. Then Strong Arm called up his brothers, and when they had embraced their father, they soon broke this chain and set him free. We must now return to the little old woman. After her son started, she gave away what was the bitter grief. While she was in the state, an old witch came up to her and said she would help her, as she hated the giant and wished to kill him. The old witch then took up the little lady on her broom, and they sailed off through the air straight to the giant's castle. Now this old witch had great power, and at once afflicted the giant with corns and tender feet. When he awoke from his sleep, he was in such pain that he could bear it no longer, so he thought he would go in search of his missing shoe, which, like the other one he had in his castle, was easy and large for his foot. When he came to the spot where the old lady and her children lived, he saw his old shoe, and with a laugh that shook the trees, he thrust his foot into it, breaking through the roof that Strong Arm and Peter had put onto it. The children, in great alarm, rushed about inside the shoe, and frightened and trembling, scrambled through the door and the slits which the giant had formerly made by his corns. By this time, the witch and the little old lady, as also Strong Arm and his 11 brothers and his father, were up to the spot. Strong Arm and his brothers shot their arrows at him. At last he fell wounded, when Strong Arm went up to him and cut off his head. Then the father and the little old woman and all their children built a new house and lived happily ever after. So this is how Strong Man killed the lady. The moral here is, it doesn't matter if you are short or if you're tall. If you have done something wrong and if you are bad, then you would be punished, right? And you can be punished. All these little kids that the old women had, old women was always afraid if they can kill the giant, if they can set their father free from the giant. But collectively, with all the power that they had and the good intention that they had of saving their father, they could kill a giant. So it doesn't matter if you're small or if you're tall or if you're short, good intentions matter. All the goodness that you have will always pay off. Okay? All right. So the second story that I have here is about a very interesting personality, a very interesting character that you might know already. How many? We are going to learn one of the greatest adventure of Aladdin today. Okay, all right. So let's begin. Once upon a time, a widow had only son whose name was Aladdin. They were very poor and lived from hand to mouth. Though Aladdin did what he could to earn some pennies by picking bananas in a faraway place. One day, as he was looking for wild figs in a grove some way from the town, Aladdin met a mysterious stranger. This smartly dressed, dark-eyed man with a trim black beard and a splendid sapphire in his turban asked Aladdin an unusual question. "Come here, boy," he ordered. "How would you like to earn a silver penny?" "A silver penny?" exclaimed Aladdin. "Sir, I would do anything for that kind of payment." "I'm not going to ask you to do much. Just go down that manhole. I'm much too big to squeeze through myself. If you do as I ask, you'll have your reward." The stranger helped Aladdin lift the manhole cover, for it was very heavy. Slim and agile as he was, the boy easily went down. His feet touched stone and he carefully made his way down some steps and found himself in a large chamber. It seemed to sparkle, though dimly lit by the flickering light of an old oil lamp. When Aladdin's eyes became used to the gloom, he saw a wonderful sight. Trees dripping with glittering jewels, pots of golden caskets full of priceless gems. Thousands of precious objects lay scattered about. It was a treasure trove. Unable to believe his eyes, Aladdin was standing dazzled when he heard a shout behind him. "The lamp! Put out the flame and bring me the lamp!" Surprised and suspicious, for why should the stranger, out of all her treasure, want only an old lamp? Aladdin wondered. Perhaps he was a wizard. He decided to be on his guard. Picking up the lamp, he retraced his steps to the entrance. "Give me the lamp!" urged the wizard impatiently. "Hand it over!" he began to shout, thrusting out his arm to grab it. But Aladdin cautiously drew back. "Let me out first." "Too bad for you," snapped the stranger, slamming down the manhole cover, never noticing that as he did so, a ring slid off his finger. A terrified Aladdin was left in pitch darkness, wondering what the wizard would do next. Then he trod onto the ring. Aimlessly putting it on his finger, he twisted it around and round. Suddenly, the room was flooded with a rosy light, and a great genie with clasped hand appeared on a cloud. "At your command, sir," said the genie. Now astounded, Aladdin could only stammer, "I want to go home." In a flash, he was back in his home, through the door tightly shut. "How did you get in?" called his mother from the kitchen stove the minute she set eyes on him. Excitedly, her son told her of all his adventures. "Where's the silver coin?" his mother asked. Aladdin clapped a hand to his brow, for all he had brought home was an old oil lamp. "Oh, mother, I'm so sorry. This is all I've got." "Well, let's hope it works. It's so dirty," and the widow began to rub the lamp. Suddenly, out shot another genie in a cloud of smoke. "You have set me free after centuries. I was a prisoner in the lamp. waiting to be freed by someone rubbing it. Now I am your obedient servant. Tell me your wishes." And the genie bowed respectfully, awaiting Aladdin's orders. The boy and his mother kept wordlessly at this incredible apparition that the genie said with a hint of impatience in his voice. "I am here at your command, sir. Tell me what you want. Anything you like." Aladdin gulped and then said, "Oh, bring us, bring." His mother, not having yet to cook dinner, went on to say, "Oh, a lovely big meal." From that day on, the widow and her son had everything they could wish for: food, clothes, and a fine home. For the genie of the lamp granted them everything they asked him. Aladdin grew into a tall, handsome young man, and his mother felt that he ought to find himself a wife sooner or later. One day, as he left the market, Aladdin happened to see Sultan's daughter, Halima. He only caught a fleeting glimpse of the princess, but it was enough for him to marry her. Aladdin told his mother, and she quickly said, "I'll ask the Sultan for his daughter's hand. He'll never be able to refuse. Wait and see." And indeed, the Sultan was easily persuaded by a casket full of big diamonds to admit the widow to the palace. However, when he learned why she had come, he told the widow that her son must bring a proof of his power and riches. This was mostly the Chamberlain's idea, for him himself was eager to marry the beautiful black-eyed Sultan's daughter. "If Aladdin wants to marry Halima," said the Sultan, "he must send me 40 slaves tomorrow. Every slave must bring a box of precious stones, and 40 Arab warriors must escort the treasure." Aladdin's mother went sadly home. The genie of the magic lamp had already worked wonders, but nothing like this. Aladdin, however, when he heard the news, was not at all dismayed. He picked up the lamp, rubbed it harder than ever, and told the genie what he had required. The genie simply clapped his hands 3 times. 40 slaves magically appeared, carrying the gemstones, together with their escort of 40 Arab warriors. When he saw all this the next day, the Sultan was taken aback. He never imagined such wealth could exist. Just as he was about to accept Aladdin as his daughter's bridegroom, the envious Chamberlain broke with a question. "Where will all they live?" he asked the Sultan. The Sultan pondered for a moment. Then, allowing greed to get the better out of him, he told Aladdin to build a great, splendid palace for Halima. Aladdin went straight home, and in what was once a wilderness, the genie built him a palace. The last obstacle had been overcome. The wedding took place with great celebrations, and the Sultan was especially happy at finding such a rich and powerful son-in-law. News of Aladdin's sudden fortune and wealth spread like wildfire, until one day a strange merchant stopped beneath the palace window. "Oh, lamps for new," he called to the princess, standing onto the balcony. Now Aladdin had always kept his secret to himself. Only his mother knew it, and she had never told a soul. Halima had been kept in the dark, and so now, wanting to give Aladdin a surprise as well as make a good bargain, she fetched the old oil lamp she had seen Aladdin tuck away and gave it to the merchant in exchange of a new one. The merchant quickly began to rub it, and the genie was now at the service of the wizard. who had got his magic lamp back. In the second, he whisked away all Aladdin's possessions and magically sent the palace and the princess to an unknown land. Aladdin and Sultan were at the wit's end. Nobody knew what had happened. Only Aladdin knew it had something to do with the magic lamp. But as he wept over the lost genie of the lamp, he remembered the genie of the ring from the wizard's finger. Slipping the ring on his finger, Aladdin twisted it round and round. "Take me to the palace where the wizard has hidden my wife," he ordered the genie. In a flash, he found himself inside his own palace and peeping from behind the curtain. So now Aladdin reaches to the princess, and princess suddenly spots Aladdin in her room. And he tells the princess that don't move, don't let him hear you. Take this powder and put it in his tea. Trust me. The powder quickly took effect and the wizard fell into a deep sleep. Aladdin hunted for the lamp high and low, but it was nowhere to be seen. But it had to be there. How otherwise had the wizard moved the palace? As Aladdin gazed at his sleeping enemy, he thought of peering underneath the pillow. "The lamp, at last," sighed Aladdin, hastily rubbing it. "Welcome back, master," exclaimed the genie. "Why did you leave me at another service for so long?" "Welcome," replied Aladdin. "I'm glad to see you again. I've certainly missed you. It's just as well I have you by me again." "At your command," smiled the genie. "First put this wicked wizard in chain and take him far away where he'll never be found again." The genie grinned with pleasure, nodded his head, and the wizard vanished. Halima clutched Aladdin in fear. "What's going on? Who is that genie?" "Don't worry, everything is all right." Aladdin reassured her as he told his wife the whole story of how he had met the wizard and found the magic lamp that had enabled him to marry her. Everything went back to normal and the happy pair hugged each other. "Can we return to our own kingdom?" the princess asked, thinking of her father so far away. Aladdin glanced at her with a smile. "The magic that brought you here will take you back, but with me at your side forever." The Sultan was almost ill with worry. His daughter had disappeared along with the palace, and then his son-in-law had vanished too. Nobody knew where they were. Not even the wise man hastily called to the palace to divine what happened. The jealous Chamberlain kept on repeating, "I told you Aladdin's fortune couldn't last." Everyone had lost all hope of ever seeing the missing pair again. When far away, Aladdin rubbed the magic lamp and said to the genie, "Take my wife, myself, and the palace back to our own land as fast as you can." "In a flash, sir," replied the genie. At the snap of a finger, the palace rose into the air and sped over Sultan's kingdom. Above the heads of his astonished subjects, it gently floated down to the earth and landed on its own side. Aladdin and Halima rushed to embrace the Sultan. To this very day, in that distant country, you can still admire the traces of an ancient palace, which folk call the palace that came from the skies. You want to see which is the palace that came from the skies? This is how it looked. So here we come to an end of our second story. Okay, so let me tell you what is the moral of the story here. You should never be disappointed with what you have. There is always a way created for you. Aladdin was very poor. He couldn't even, he didn't even have one meal in a day. So he was that poor that he couldn't afford one meal per day. But there was a way which was created for him, and intelligently he knew the clues and he picked the clues and he made a way for himself. So you always need to work hard, understand what is happening around, and be alert. Things would make way for you.